0G. Before mobile phones existed as we know them today, there was a generation of wireless communication that most people have completely forgotten. Starting in the late 1940s, systems like the Mobile Telephone Service, or MTS, allowed people to make voice calls from their cars using radio technology. These weren't pocket-sized devices. They were heavy, bulky units mounted inside vehicles, often taking up the entire trunk. A single operator would manually connect your call, the same way a telephone operator worked in an office. There were only a handful of channels available in any given city, which meant only a few people could be on a call at the same time. If all the channels were in use, you simply had to wait. Coverage was limited mostly to major cities, and the cost was significant enough that only businesses or very wealthy individuals could afford it. Still, it planted the seed. For the first time, a person could make a phone call without being physically attached to a wall. That idea, communication on the move, would go on to shape everything that followed. 1G. The first true generation of mobile networks arrived in the early 1980s, and it changed the relationship between people and communication forever. The system that defined this era was called AMPS, the Advanced Mobile Phone System, launched commercially in the United States in 1983. Japan and parts of Europe had already introduced their own versions slightly earlier, but AMPS became one of the most widely adopted standards. Unlike the manually operated systems of the past, 1G networks were automatic. You could dial a number yourself and get connected without any operator involvement. The technology was entirely analog, meaning voice signals were transmitted as continuous radio waves, much like an FM radio broadcast. That had real consequences. Calls were often noisy, with crackling or interference common, especially at the edge of a coverage area. Security was almost non-existent. With the right equipment, anyone nearby could listen to your conversation. Still, the freedom it offered was genuinely new. Carrying a phone in your car meant staying reachable, no matter where you were driving, and that alone felt remarkable. 2G. The second generation of mobile networks launched in Finland in 1991, and it represented a fundamental shift in how wireless communication worked. Instead of analog signals, 2G used digital transmission. Voice calls were converted into streams of data before being sent and reassembled on the other end. This made calls significantly clearer, reduced interference, and, for the first time, introduced real encryption, meaning conversations were far harder to intercept. The most dominant standard for 2G was GSM, the global system for mobile communications. It spread rapidly across Europe and most of the world, and it introduced something that became deeply embedded in everyday life: the SIM card. That small chip stored your identity separately from the device, meaning you could switch phones by simply moving the card over. 2G also brought SMS text messaging, which started as a minor technical feature, but quickly became a global cultural habit. Sending a short written message to someone else's phone was new, inexpensive, and oddly personal. Networks were also more efficient, meaning more users could share the same spectrum without interference crowding everyone out. 2.5G. As 2G networks spread, the demand for more than just voice and text started to grow. Engineers developed upgrades to the existing 2G infrastructure that didn't quite reach the capabilities of a full new generation. These in-between steps became known as 2.5G. The most important of these was GPRS, General Packet Radio Service, which introduced packet-switched data to mobile networks. Before GPRS, mobile data worked like a phone call. You held a connection open the entire time, even when no data was actually moving. GPRS changed that by breaking data into small packets and only using the network when information was actively being sent or received. This was more efficient and made it practical to check email or browse basic websites from a phone for the first time. A follow-up upgrade called EDGE enhanced data rates for GSM evolution, pushed speeds a little further. It was still slow by any modern standard, but it gave people a first real taste of mobile internet. Loading a web page took patience, but the idea that you could access the web from something in your pocket was, at the time, quietly extraordinary. 3G. The third generation of mobile networks was designed from the start to carry internet data at meaningful speeds. not just as an afterthought. Standards like UMTS, Universal Mobile Telecommunications System, began rolling out in the early 2000s. Japan led the way, with NTT Docomo launching a commercial 3G service in 2001. The jump from 2.5G was significant. Data speeds improved enough that video calls became possible, streaming audio worked reasonably well, and browsing the web felt closer to what people experienced on a home computer. This was also the era when smartphones began to emerge in a serious way. When Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007, it ran on 2G. When the 3G model arrived a year later, mobile internet use exploded. People weren't just calling or texting anymore. They were watching videos, using maps, downloading apps. The network was carrying a completely different kind of traffic than it had been built for, and it showed. 3G gave mobile internet a shape that people could build habits around, and those habits grew faster than anyone anticipated. 3.5G. Shortly after 3G rolled out, engineers realized the original standards weren't keeping up with how quickly data usage was expanding. A set of upgrades known collectively as HSPA, High-Speed Packet Access, significantly improved the speed and responsiveness of 3G networks without requiring entirely new infrastructure. Download speeds that hovered around 384 kilobits per second on basic 3G could reach several megabits per second on HSPA. A further refinement called HSPA+ pushed speeds higher still, with some implementations reaching theoretical peaks of 42 megabits per second. Real-world speeds were naturally lower, but the difference was noticeable in everyday use. Streaming video became smoother, pages loaded faster, and the experience of being on a mobile network started to feel less like a compromise. This period is sometimes called 3.5G because it sits firmly between the original 3G standard and the next full generation. Some carriers marketed these upgrades under different names and even labeled them as 4G in advertising, which created genuine confusion at the time about what the term actually meant. 4G. The fourth generation of mobile networks set an entirely new baseline for what mobile internet could feel like. The standard that came to define 4G was LTE, long-term evolution, which began rolling out commercially around 2009 and 2010. Unlike 3G, which had been adapted from voice-first infrastructure to carry data, LTE was designed as an all-IP network, and over time, voice services migrated to packet-based technologies such as VoLTE. This architectural shift brought dramatic speed improvements, where 3G offered a few megabits per second in good conditions. LTE could deliver tens of megabits per second, and eventually much more. Latency dropped as well, meaning the delay between sending a request and receiving a response became noticeably shorter. That mattered for video calls, navigation, and anything requiring a quick back-and-forth connection. Streaming high-definition video on a mobile device became completely ordinary during this era. The smartphone had been growing through the 3G years, but it truly came into its own on 4G networks. Apps built around fast, constant connectivity stopped feeling like novelties and started feeling like necessities. 4G LTE-A. Once 4G LTE was established, work began on extending and refining it. The result was LTE-Advanced, often written as LTE-A, which was formally recognized as a true 4G standard by the International Telecommunication Union. Earlier, LTE systems, strictly speaking, hadn't fully met the ITU's original requirements for 4G, but LTE-A did. One of its defining features was carrier aggregation, which allowed a device to connect to multiple frequency bands at the same time and combine them into a single, faster data stream. Think of it like adding extra lanes to a highway rather than building an entirely new road. LTE-A also improved how networks handled many users in the same area, which had been a persistent problem in crowded locations, like stadiums or busy transit stations. Speeds under ideal conditions could theoretically exceed 1 gigabit per second, though real-world performance sat well below that. For most users, the day-to-day experience wasn't dramatically different from standard LTE, but the efficiency gains made a meaningful difference at the network level, particularly in dense urban environments where congestion had been a growing concern. 5G. The fifth generation of mobile networks is different from its predecessors in ways that go beyond raw speed. Deployment began in earnest around 2019 and has been expanding steadily ever since. 5G operates across three distinct frequency ranges, each with its own characteristics. Low-band 5G covers wide areas, much like 4G, but with modest speed improvements. Mid-band offers a practical balance of coverage and speed, and is where most real-world 5G performance is felt. High-band, often called millimeter wave, delivers extraordinary speeds, potentially exceeding 10 gigabits per second, but only across very short distances, making it useful mainly in dense urban areas or specific venues. Beyond speed, 5G was designed to support a massive number of simultaneous connections, far more than 4G could accommodate. This makes it foundational for the Internet of Things, where enormous networks of sensors, vehicles, and machines communicate constantly. 5G Advanced. As 5G networks continued to mature, the 3GPP standards body began developing what they formally named 5G Advanced, sometimes written as 5.5G. This is not a new generation, but a significant evolution of the existing one. Specifications began rolling out with Release 18 in 2024. The improvements focus on several areas: higher uplink speeds, meaning faster transmission from the device to the network rather than just the reverse, better energy efficiency, more precise positioning, and deeper integration of artificial intelligence directly into how the network operates. One major area of focus is satellite connectivity, allowing 5G devices to link with non-terrestrial networks in places where building traditional towers isn't practical. Remote regions, open ocean, or sparsely populated rural areas. 5G Advanced also refined support for devices with very different requirements, from simple sensors that transmit rarely to high-performance machines that need constant, reliable data. It represents the natural maturation of the 5G era, extracting more capability from the infrastructure already being built before the next full generation eventually arrives. 6G. The sixth generation of mobile networks is still in the research and early standardization phase, with commercial deployment not expected until the early 2030s. Countries including South Korea, Japan, China, the United States, and members of the European Union have all launched significant research programs aimed at defining what 6G will be. The goals extend well beyond speed and capacity improvements. Researchers are exploring frequencies in the terahertz range, far above millimeter wave, which could theoretically support data rates measured in terabits per second. Integrated sensing is another major concept, the idea that the network itself could actively detect and map the physical environment, not just carry signals between devices. Artificial intelligence is expected to be woven into the core architecture of 6G, rather than layered on top of existing systems, the way it has been with 5G. Energy sustainability is also a central concern, since future networks will need to support an even larger number of connected devices without consuming power in proportion. What 6G ultimately becomes will depend on both the technical work happening now and the shape of a world that, by the time it arrives, will look quite different from today.